Okay, so what we're going to go through now is how to actually construct an essay or an essay scaffold for the Crucible that is going to let you answer any question that may come up in your trials or HSC. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by having a look at what you need to be doing for your first paragraph. Sorry, let's actually start with the introduction. So what we're going to do with the introduction is, look, it should just be around 100 to 130 words. Do not memorize an essay. It needs to be written to the question on the day. And you've got to practice doing that before you get in there. And obviously with the right scaffold and the right examples and structure, that will be a lot easier for you to do. But basically for the introduction, you want to start by answering the set question, using the words of the question. Don't just parrot or repeat the question. Kind of see if you can try and use words of the question and make them into your own sentences. So sort of start there and then go into the Crucible again, using words of the rubric and the question. I will create something specifically on being able to take this structure and adapt it to different questions. But for now, let's go with the structure. So really important, as I've already said in my last video on this, you need to have a very strong understanding of the context that Miller wrote his this particular play in. And with that McCarthy context that he is trying to challenge or critique, what he does is he's challenging the audience's assumptions on human behavior, right? So what he's doing is he's kind of exposing the inconsistencies or discrepancies between what the Salem theocracy tried to do and what they actually ended up doing. So what they tried to do was promote unity. They really wanted to have a strong, religious theocracy. But in trying to implement that or maintain it, they end up persecuting people. So there's this real sort of paradox that emerges there. So again, to break that down, they're motivated by unity and values of morality, but then in their behavior contradicts this because it's full of fear, it's full of persecution and violence and injustice, really. So what we're going to do is when we're going into this particular paragraph, the key place for you to look at in the play is the overture. Now, what I was going to do, I'm going to actually show you sort of bits of that. So I've got my sort of copy here. So if you've got a copy, then that would be great if you want to follow along with me. But basically what I want to draw your attention to is, so we've got this here. So we've got this part, but as in all such matters, the issue was not clear cut. The danger was still a possibility, and in unity still lay the best promise of safety. So, you should read through it again, but basically we've got this idea that danger, like they were scared, they were, of this danger of, what might happen if these sort of devilish ideas are allowed into, or this challenge, there is a challenge to the theocracy. And so what people wanted to do was maintain unity, right? And that's how they were going to stay safe. So I've got this little comment here. So the human motivation here is unity and safety. So that's what the Salem community want to have, but their motivations, or the behaviors, are motivated by fear. And this results in persecution, which is obviously paradoxical or inconsistent with their actual motivations. And then we've got this motif of the wilderness. Okay, so you've got the edge of the wilderness was close by. The American continent stretched endlessly west and was full of mystery for them. It stood dark and threatening over their shoulders day and night. So this is like a representative of the values or beliefs that don't align with the values of the theocracy. You've got this puritanistic, Christian values, and then you've got these guys who are considered the heathen. They're the ones who are, in the wilderness, in the kind of forest, and they're, the Indian tribes, and that's what everybody's really scared about, right? So, it sort of says, for out of it, Indian tribes were raided from time to time, and Reverend Paris had parishioners that had lost relatives to these heathens. So they're really scared about, obviously, people being, coming to the devil and so forth. And so what we've got here, so the virgin forest was the devil's last preserve. So hence the forest is the motif or the metaphor for evil. And so when the girls are discovered in the forest dancing, that's obviously like a really bad sign of the fact that the devil's present and so on, right? So what happened was, for these reasons, among others, they carried out an air of innate resistance, even of persecution. So this is where the kind of persecution arises from wanting to maintain unity. And that, again, that's a paradox. Their fathers had, of course, been persecuted in England, so now they and their church found it necessary to deny any other sect its freedom, lest their new Jerusalem be defiled and corrupted by wrong ways and deceitful ideas. So that's it. So they're going to deny everyone else the freedom to practice something different because they don't want to be corrupted by these deceitful ideas. Great. So the main thing really is that you get an idea of that paradox. So there's this paradox of, kind of human motivations and behavior. And what they've said here is, so simply it was this: for good purposes, even high purposes, so that's the unification motivation, the people of Salem developed a theocracy, a combine of state and religious power whose function was to keep the community together and to prevent any kind of disunity that might open it to destruction or by material or ideological means. So that's kind of going back again to the fact that they had really good intentions here, but then the actual application of it just wasn't good, right? So there you've got this paradox of exclusion and prohibition coming out. And then you've got Miller's point of view, which is so important. So he says there, the witch hunt was a perverse manifestation of the panic which set in among all classes when the balance began to turn towards greater individual freedom. So really that idea of saying it was a perverse manifestation of the panic, it's very biased. You can see like the fact he's calling it perverse is a real pretty, like it's a pretty strong critique of the behavior that started happening in Salem, and then of course applying that back to the McCarthy era, where he's criticizing the injustice of this time and the fact that people were just being accused for things without any evidence, and people just were getting really hysterical and happy to kind of point the finger and throw people in jail just based on hearsay, which is just someone said it. There's no evidence. And that's what he's fighting for. He's fighting for freedom. And he did it. It was so, like, it was a gutsy thing that he did, because at the end of the day, like, he was actually accused of communism. So you can kind of see how, like, he was sort of in the challenge that he was doing at the time. It was putting himself quite at risk to challenge his particular ideas. But that's where we start seeing these parallels happen between Miller and Proctor, which we'll go into a little bit later. So look, those are the main things. Of course, then you can see that when the play starts, the girls are discovered dancing like heathen in the forest. So, that's similarly there, like heathen, and, the rhetorical question, it's, likening them to savages, unholy individuals. And so obviously they have to figure out some way to save themselves. So that's when they start lying and, out of desperation. So a lot of this is about, saving yourself and doing whatever you have to do, which includes lying and all kinds of things that are very unchristian. So there's that irony that emerges from all the paradoxes. So in the next video, we're going to go into the next paragraph. And so stay tuned for that.